Did you know that the Vietnam War saw over 2.7 million Americans serve, many of whom were drafted against their will? Let's dive into the controversial and complex history of the Selective Service System during the Vietnam War. Welcome to Truth Behind History. Today, we're exploring the Selective Service System during the Vietnam War and the phenomenon of draft dodging. Buckle up, because this story is filled with twists, turns, and a lot of heated debate. From the mechanics of the draft to the ways people avoided it, we have a lot to cover. Let's get started. The Selective Service System, or simply the draft, has been a part of American history since 1917, but it played a particularly significant role during the Vietnam War. By 1965, the US had escalated its involvement in Vietnam, and the demand for soldiers skyrocketed. This was a time when the draft lottery determined the fate of millions of young men. President Lyndon B. Johnson, facing mounting pressure to sustain military operations, dramatically increased draft calls. This move was highly controversial and sparked intense opposition across the country. But to understand the impact, we need to delve into how the draft system actually worked. The Selective Service System required all men aged 18 to 26 to register. These young men were then subject to a lottery system, which determined the order in which they would be called to serve. Each year, birth dates were drawn randomly, and those whose birthdays were selected first were the first to be called up. This lottery system aimed to be fair, but it often felt anything but to those whose numbers came up. Here's how the draft lottery worked. Every man aged 18 to 26 had to register with the Selective Service System. Birth dates were placed in capsules and drawn at random to determine the order of call. Men whose numbers were called received induction notices, often bringing life-altering news. Those who received notices were required to report for physical and mental examinations to determine their fitness for service. The first draft lottery in December 1969 was broadcast live on national television. Imagine the anxiety as young men and their families watched, waiting to see if their birthday would be called. Not everyone was willing to answer the call. Many young men sought ways to avoid the draft, giving rise to a wave of draft dodging. Draft dodging took many forms, from legal deferments to outright refusal and fleeing the country. This led to widespread protests and civil disobedience, as the anti-war movement gained momentum. Let's break down some of the common ways men avoided the draft. Enrolling in college could delay service. This meant that if you were a student, you could postpone your induction until after you graduated. However, this option was often only available to those who could afford higher education, leading to accusations that the draft unfairly targeted the poor and working class. Real or exaggerated health issues could exempt someone from service. Draft boards had the final say on whether a medical condition was severe enough to warrant an exemption, leading to wide variations in decisions. Claiming moral or religious opposition to all war could grant a deferment or non-combatant status. This was a difficult status to obtain, requiring proof of deeply held beliefs and often involving rigorous questioning by draft boards. Serving part-time stateside instead of full-time overseas was another way to avoid Vietnam. The National Guard and reserves became refuges for many seeking to avoid active duty in the war zone. Thousands chose to escape conscription by crossing the border. Canada became a haven for American draft dodgers, though this decision came with significant personal and legal risks. The draft was like a lottery with life-altering consequences. Many felt it was unjust and disproportionately affected the less privileged and minorities. The wealthy and well-connected often found ways to avoid service, leading to a sense of inequality and resentment. An estimated 30,000 to 100,000 Americans fled to Canada to avoid the draft. Their lives changed dramatically as they sought refuge in a new country, often facing significant legal and social challenges. For many, this decision meant leaving behind families, friends, and futures in the United States. Draft resistance wasn't limited to fleeing the country. Some men went underground within the US aided by networks of supporters who provided shelter and assistance. This underground movement became a crucial part of the broader anti-war effort. High-profile resistors like Muhammad Ali brought national attention to the issue. Ali famously refused induction, citing his religious beliefs and opposition to the war. His stance cost him his boxing titles and nearly landed him in prison, but it also made him a symbol of resistance and courage. The consequences for draft dodgers varied. Some faced legal action, including imprisonment, while others lived in fear of arrest and prosecution. Socially, draft dodgers often faced stigma and ostracism, labeled as unpatriotic or cowardly. The emotional toll on these individuals and their families was profound. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter issued a blanket pardon to draft dodgers, allowing them to return to the United States without fear of prosecution. This move was controversial but marked a significant step towards national healing. The pardon was intended to reconcile the nation and move past the deep divisions caused by the Vietnam War. The legacy of the draft and draft dodging during the Vietnam War is complex. It highlighted deep divisions in American society and forced a national conversation about duty, morality, and justice. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. stands as a poignant reminder of the war's human cost, honoring the sacrifices of those who served and those who resisted. Today, we remember those who served, those who resisted, and the many who were caught in between. The story of the Vietnam Draft is a powerful reminder of the human cost of war and the enduring impact of civic decisions. The Vietnam War and the draft system that fueled it remain subjects of intense study and reflection, offering lessons that continue to resonate in discussions about military service and national policy. The Vietnam Draft had far-reaching effects on American society, shaping everything from public opinion on military service to the structure of the Selective Service System itself. The draft's inequities sparked debates on fairness and justice, leading to significant changes in how future drafts would be conducted. The backlash against the draft also played a role in the eventual abolition of the draft in 1973, shifting the US military to an all-volunteer force. For many, the draft was not just a political issue, but a deeply personal and emotional one, affecting their lives in profound ways. The Vietnam Draft also left an indelible mark on American culture. It influenced music, literature, film, and art, with countless works exploring the themes of war, duty, and resistance. Songs like Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival and films like Born on the 4th of July and The Deer Hunter captured the spirit of the era and the complex emotions surrounding the draft. The long-term effects of the Vietnam Draft are still felt today. Many veterans struggled with the psychological and physical aftermath of the war, while draft dodgers face challenges reintegrating into American society after years of exile. Both groups have had to navigate the lingering impacts of their experiences, shaping their lives and legacies. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this video informative, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into fascinating topics. And let us know in the comments, what are your thoughts on the Vietnam Draft? Do you think the draft system was fair, or do you believe it disproportionately affected certain groups? We want to hear your stories and opinions. See you next time.